Last year you launched 10,000 Brains. Tell us about the organization's goals. Why is now the right time to do that, and how might it ultimately lead to things like better biomarkers?
Yeah, so the 10,000 Brains project was founded 6 months ago in order to accelerate the adoption of the use of AI within the neurodegeneration research community. The time is right for this. I mean, I don't have to tell anybody in this room that AI is here. It's making an impact in our businesses and medical research. But I submit to you that major transitions like this and the way we work will need to be managed, need to be coordinated. And that if left to its own devices, it may not move as efficiently as possible when we're talking about ecosystem-wide changes that need to happen. So what we're here to do is to fill in the data landscape that's needed to make sure AI is unbiased and very effective. We're here to train an AI-savvy workforce, and we're here then to help with the implementation through the better management of the tools that will be used and through launching the new businesses through venture philanthropy models. You know, at the end of the day, we'll be working very closely with the research community, but it's about the patients and the caregivers. We unfortunately, in our field, have never had a survivor of neurodegeneration.
Pat, how is philanthropy enabling 10K Brains?
Yeah, so you asked about biomarkers earlier, and I think it's an important question about how we're going to make better progress in neurodegeneration. We're cutting across all of these neurodegenerative disorders to rethink the categorization. One of the many things that AI is really good at is helping you to look through huge data sets from human biological samples and cognitive tests and things, and look for patterns and find meaning. And looking across the observable symptoms as we know them today, as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, may not be the best path to a cure through combination treatment strategies, where many of the shared mechanisms underneath these diseases are actually shared. And so one of the things we're doing through a philanthropic approach is we're able to redefine the scope of our organization and fund research in a way that isn't done currently. Philanthropy has more flexibility. We can innovate, we can try things, and that's what we're doing with 10,000 Brains. And the importance of that is that we'll end up with better biomarkers. We'll be able to define these diseases based on these biological mechanisms and not by these observable symptoms. And that leads to targeted treatments, getting the right patients on the right combinations of treatments, and monitoring treatment response to know when we have to make a change in that combination. So I think 5 or 10 years from now, we won't be talking very much about ALS or FTD or Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. We'll be talking about what type of neuroinflammation you have. We'll be talking about what combination of proteins are building up in your brain, and we'll be administering treatments on that basis. I mean, we're actually really optimistic and excited within neurodegeneration right now. We've got some really exciting FTD treatments in human trials. We've got ALS treatments in human trials, and we've got 140 plus treatments in human trials for Alzheimer's. But we're going to have to also sort out all that complexity to decide who gets what treatments. And I think AI and philanthropy funding it can rethink these silos that we have today.
Thanks for sharing that. It's encouraging and hopeful to hear you embrace it.
I think we have to embrace the complexity. You know, we have to stop hoping that we're going to find a single protein for this disease and a single one for that disease. I think, you know, and this is happening, thankfully. I mean, the new diagnostic criteria for AD, for example, that's under discussion for ratification by the community, really reflects the reality of co-pathologies and the idea that you could have underlying pathology building up and not show symptoms yet, and vice versa. I mean, we're starting to think about this in a much more sophisticated way, and I think that's important, because the only way we're going to get to real solutions is understand the real problem for what it is, and that's why AI is so important in our particular field. The human brain. If we had a bigger human brain and could understand these diseases, the diseases would be more complex too. So we need AI to kind of leapfrog for us and help us to understand these things. Some people in the AI community will say, you know, there's a lot of talk, obviously we need to make sure our models aren't biased and all of that. And there's a lot of talk about that. some people in the AI community will say, well, hold on a second, the current medical mainstream is phenomenally biased, right? I mean, it's not like clinical trials have been inclusive. It's not like there's equal access to care. Isn't there a double standard here being applied to this new era of using AI? And the answer is yes, it's an irrational, higher double standard, and we should embrace it. This is an opportunity to do it right and be better than we have been historically. And so we should hold the AI era to higher standards. We should collect the diverse data sets. And we should train a new generation of AI-savvy neuroscientists who are also different, who are inclusive, who are diverse, because they will see things in the data. A lot of what we're seeing in neurodegeneration is environmental. It's a life course disease, and there are practical things we can do, modifiable risk factors, and we're not going to be able to identify those, understand them, intervene effectively, build trust with the patients who we want to use these technologies, unless we have researchers who look like them and understand them. We know that the disease is different in women and men. We need more women researchers working on this. And so until we do that, I mean, even if you objectively have some treatments that are useful, we're going to miss the mark. And let's hold ourselves to an unfair, higher standard as we enter this new chapter, right? And do it better than we have before.
Part one is making sure we're getting data from diverse people. Part two is making sure that that data is available to all the people who would want to work on it. And how do we democratize access to that data? How do we make sure that, if you are working at a prestigious university with all the best tools at hand, you can create insights, but also you maybe, have fantastic ideas without being equipped and without having the fortitude of an institution like that behind you. Do you still deserve to access that data and to be able to generate insights? I don't know if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, well, when Emily and I first met, she was still at Answer ALS, and we worked together to put the Answer ALS data set on the Alzheimer's Disease Data Initiative's data sharing platform. That's run by Gates Ventures, Bill Gates' private office. Bill and his family have a connection to Alzheimer's that they've been very public about, which led him into some very significant philanthropic efforts around Alzheimer's. The point of putting it on these data sharing platforms is that, and that's not the only one, there are many constructive efforts going on around the world and in the US, but many of them have free workspaces associated with the data sets, so that a talented researcher from anywhere in the world can log in, get a free account, and use free compute to answer an interesting scientific research question. They can bring in data of their own as well to combine with those data sets. And I think this is the future. There are some real important and thorny technical questions about how we're going to make these massive data sets that are all over the world available to people in a way that's cost effective. We don't want to make copies of these data sets and move them around and have to store them in redundant places, So we have to work on some underlying computer science technologies that allow this. The neurodegeneration research community does not have to solve this problem alone. These things are happening out in the computer science world. But what we need is an interface, and 10,000 Brains hopes to be a constructive player in this, bringing those very important advances from the broader ecosystem in, so that the neurodegeneration research ecosystem knows that they're out there, can use them, give them the training they need to leverage those solutions as well. What we do as professionals working full-time in the ecosystem is simply not possible without the advocates, because it's your stories and your legacy that creates the moral authority we have to go in and shake up the existing ecosystem and to drive it with a sense of urgency to actually get things done. And you don't have to be there every day. It's just that your story exists, your story has been put out there, and we use that every day. We draw inspiration from it personally, but frankly, we also use it in our discussions with the ecosystem to say, not only do we have to go fast, but we have to actually go to a place where there's going to be impact at the end of the road. In other words, the research ecosystem has a tendency to focus on its own work, and people can get caught up in just doing one study after another, and not really think too hard or work too hard to make sure it goes to that next step and moves toward a treatment that moves toward commercialization, because that's not what they do, they're academics or whatever. And that's very understandable from their perspective. The advocates are the ones that allow us to push through that and really shake it up, because frankly, it's really difficult to say no to the legacy of people like your husband and you as an advocate, because you deserve solutions to this stuff. So we use it all the time, even when you're not there. I think we need to start imagining, have a big imagination about what the future could be. When we have these blood tests that we do now, and we know we can tell you that you've got Alzheimer's pathology starting to build up 15 years before you got observable symptoms, well, we can intervene through a combination of lifestyle adjustments that we're extra motivated to actually obey, and through treatments, and we can start to envision a possibility of the human experience with no decline in your mental capacities. Imagine the possibility of living life to the fullest all the way through. All the knowledge and skills that you have as a human being continuing to accumulate and being fully brought to bear for the benefit of society, for rich relationships. The idea of lifelong human flourishing. I mean, we have to stop thinking about this as like an inevitable decline and all of that, because as we move to earlier and earlier detection, we can actually intervene before you've had any problems whatsoever. And that's really exciting. And I think we can get there. It'll take a while, obviously. This is complicated, but that's what we're building toward.
That's a perfect ending note.